The Taurus Judge. Some find this line of handguns to be a really awesome invention, absolutely practical, very versatile, very deadly, and others find it to be more or less useless, a meme, a gimmick. Personally, I think these things are absolutely useful. They certainly have their place regardless of what you think of them, regardless of what your uses are, regardless of what you compare them to. There is a place for the Taurus Judge, the Smith & Wesson Governor, and whatever other 410 handguns come out in the future. Filming this early 2024. When I say Taurus Judge, I'm talking about 410 handguns in general. There's not a whole lot of them out there yet. There's some Derringers out there, but we're talking about handguns that can accept 410 shotgun shells. A 410 shotgun shell is a very, very, very small shotgun shell. If you're not familiar, it is fired out of 410 shotguns, which are still full-size shotguns. They're just shrunken down to accommodate the 410 shell. The main advantage to them is the fact that they're very light. They have very low recoil, very easy to fire, very easy to control, very easy to place follow-up shots, and with certain loads can be pretty good for big game too, depending on what you're doing. But generally speaking, the 410 shotgun is a shrunken down shotgun that's smaller, lighter, weaker, but it certainly has its place. Now, step down to these revolvers. They can accept those same 410 shells that the full-size 410 shotguns use. And it's very, very interesting. You can now fire those shells out of something much, much smaller. 410 shotguns are already pretty small for shotguns, but if you fire a 410 shell out of a full-size shotgun, let's say with an 18-inch barrel or so, they absolutely can be deadly if you get the correct load. There's all kinds of triple-aught buckshot you can get that are in the 410 load, and those things absolutely can be deadly out of a shotgun that length. All that muzzle velocity, do not want to be anywhere around those things. Now, of course, they're not going to be as deadly as a 12-gauge shotgun. Hell no. Those things will trump a 410 shotgun any day of the week. But again, you're also going to be getting a lot more recoil, much louder bang. It's going to be harder to control, something like that. That's where the 410 shotgun has its place. Now, if I were to pick a shotgun for defense, absolutely I'm going to go with the 12-gauge. I just think that there's so many more advantages in comparison to the disadvantages. You may disagree. You may be a person who's just more comfortable firing a 410 shotgun, and generally speaking, they still get the job done anyway. There's debate on it, but we're not going to be talking about that right now so much. We're talking about these handguns. If we can get that 410 round in a gun this small, that's very, very interesting. Hell no, I would absolutely not fire a 12-gauge out of a gun this size. That would probably destroy your wrist. But if we can get the 410 shell, a tried and true round that does work, that is lethal out of 18-inch barrels into a gun this size, think of all the advantages you have with a shotgun in comparison to a rifle. That's kind of how I see the 410 shell in comparison to, say, a 357 Magnum single round. Yes, the single round is going to have a much higher velocity. It's going to have a lot more damage with the single projectile. But divide that energy into multiple projectiles. What are the advantages of having multiple projectiles in comparison to a single projectile? Easier to hit your target. You don't have to aim as much. If it's really, really dark, if your adrenaline's going nuts in a life or death situation, even though the projectiles themselves will not do as much damage as that single projectile will do that's concentrated, you at least will be more likely to hit your target. In fact, you may miss your target completely if you fire with that single round. Depending on the situation, how much light there is, how good your aim is, there's so many variables, but my point is the reason people pick shotguns over rifles for home defense, generally speaking, carries that same logic onto these 410 handguns. Why would you fire a shotgun instead of a rifle? Why would you fire a 410 round out of a handgun instead of a single round of anything out of a handgun? It's that same exact logic. We're just dealing with smaller rounds and with more compact guns with much less muzzle velocity for both the single round projectiles as well as the 410 shells. Now, the biggest problem a lot of people have with these style handguns is the fact that they just think they're too weak. They think they're gimmicks because the 410 already some don't like out of a full-size shotgun. They don't think it's effective enough. But now you're decreasing that muzzle velocity substantially because we're decreasing the barrel length substantially. 2.5-inch barrel or so, 3-inch barrel. It's a significantly less than an 18.5-inch barrel. I'll leave it at that. So that's the first issue a lot of people have with the 410 handguns. Now, I personally don't have an issue with that. If you watch ballistic videos, if you do your research, watching these very guns firing 410 rounds, you'd be surprised. A lot of them actually do really, really well. Some don't. In fact, if you get any generic triple-aught buckshot 410 round designed for an actual full-length shotgun. Generally speaking, they don't do that well. I mean, they'd still usually be lethal even out of something like this, but they're not very consistent. You can watch ballistic videos of them getting maybe 8 to 10 inches through the ballistic gel. The FBI standard is considered 12 inches, meaning if you were to fire a projectile at a person, it would go through their arm, through the bone, get into the thoracic cavity, drop their blood pressure, stop them. Some argue you only need to fire up to 8 inches. If you shot somebody head on in their chest without going through any other body part, without having to also go through their arm or shoulder or anything like that, that will also generally be sufficient. But the whole 12-inch rule FBI thing, they're talking about going through somebody's arm and then also into the thoracic cavity. The generic triple-aught buck 410s, generally speaking, actually do make that 8-inch mark. They just don't make the 12-inch mark most of the time. That's where a lot of people have a problem with these things. They don't see the point. Yeah, you get the 3 or 4 extra pellets, but what does it matter if I'm not going to be able to stop them? That's kind of where a lot of their issues come in. Again, though, that's with generic 410 rounds designed for 410 shotguns. They sell 410 rounds designed for 410 handguns specifically, and a lot of those do excellent. The Federals, I keep saying this, but the Federal 410s meant for these handguns are devastating. You can watch ballistic videos on those things. Gun Sam, a great YouTube channel, he did a video with the Federals being fired out of a Smith & Wesson Governor. I think it's a 2.75-inch barrel or so. Passed with flying colors. All 4 of the projectiles made it past the 12-inch mark. Could you imagine getting hit by 4 of those things? Hell, even 2 of those things. That's going to be pretty devastating. If you miss 2 of them and the other 2 hit, that's still good. Again, quantity over quality is what we have with these things. We just have multiple projectiles firing. It's easier to hit your target, despite what those projectiles may do. That's the whole point of firing a shotgun instead of a rifle. You just want a lot of power close up, a lot easier to hit your target. Don't have to aim as well. I know everybody's a range expert, everybody's a gun expert on the internet. I get it. Everybody's got perfect aim. Everybody can fire extremely well in competitions. I know we all are on the internet. Everybody is. But when your adrenaline's going, when you're in a life or death situation that comes up, a home defense situation, maybe your aim might not be as good as when you're nice and safe at a firing range. Maybe. I don't know. I've never been in that situation. But if I had to make an educated guess, I'd argue it's going to be a little bit harder to hit your target in a real world situation. That's just me though. Now, I'm not saying you have to fire a 410 round or else you're not going to hit your target. Of course not. What I'm saying is that is an advantage the 410 round has out of these guns. Another problem with the 410 rounds, again, generic ones, they oftentimes flare up a little bit too much in these handguns. Some of them do, some of them don't. It does depend on the handgun. It depends on the round, but they don't always function optimally in these things. They don't always eject well. Again, they're designed for 410 shotguns, not the handguns. But if you get the ones designed for the handguns, specifically those Federals, very, very impressed with those things. Deadly, absolutely deadly rounds. But Winchester makes their PDX-1s. Those are interesting. A handful of discs followed by BBs. That's interesting. Pretty good performance on those as well. Hornady makes the triple defense. You're getting multiple projectiles. You have 5 rounds at least you can fire. Smith & Wesson Governor's got 6. So again, for home defense, for close range, I want those extra projectiles. In fact, this is my home defense handgun of choice, this Taurus Judge Magnum. 3-inch barrel. We have a 3-inch chamber, so some of that's also going to carry with the muzzle velocity. That's really going to force those rounds forward. So if you have a round that you're kind of iffy, you want it to reach that 12-inch mark, and it's just not there, this actually might propel them just to that 12-inch point. It's a little bit heavier, a little bit clunkier, a little big and beefy. Yeah, it's kind of an obnoxiously wide gun, but for home defense, car defense, I'm not really that concerned about weight. It's certainly a lot lighter than a full-length shotgun if you want a handgun for defense in the home. Now, personally, my weapon of choice is an actual shotgun for home defense, but I still like to keep this for home defense as a backup as well. But what if there's a weird situation that comes up where I want to get around a tight corner or something and not have to hold a much larger firearm? Even a Mossberg Shockwave, this is still a lot smaller and more compact than a Mossberg Shockwave. Not saying it's better, I'm saying it's another option. You want it even more light, even more compact, even more maneuverable? This could certainly work with the proper load. Out and about in the woods, 410 birdshot's great for rabid small animals. Now, I would not pick a 410 of any kind if I was out in a heavily populated area with people. That's probably my last choice would be a 410, but these handguns can accept the 45 Long Colt. So there we go, problem solved. If you want to fire a single projectile, you have that option. You can fire the 45 Long Colt. Very, very, very devastating rounds. Again, if you get the proper kind. Underwood makes some devastating 45 Long Colt jacketed hollow points. But there's so many you can pick from that are very, very powerful rounds. If anything, they perform pretty close to a 45 ACP. Tried and true round, very powerful, very deadly, used all the time. 45 Long Colts, they kind of perform similar to a 45 ACP, more or less. They're very expensive too. Unfortunately, they're still kind of expensive right now. They're not very cost effective, but it is an option you have with these things. On top of all that, we have variety with these guns. You can chamber both the 410 and the 45 Long Colt. You can cycle through multiple rounds if you wanted to. 410 buckshot, 410 birdshot for animal defense, snakes. Good luck hitting a snake with a single bullet. That's not going to be easy to do. 410 birdshot, it's like firing a cloud, a whole like fishing net of projectile. I'd imagine it'll kill a snake all right. There's so much variety with the 410. There's a lot of variety with the 45 Long Colt, and you can chamber both of those things in these 410 handguns. So if you just want that extra spread, you want that extra likelihood of being able to hit your target at all, close range, these things are badass, particularly if you get the correct projectile for them. And on top of that, they're affordable so far. Both the Smith & Wesson Governor and the Taurus Judges are very affordable handguns. The Taurus Judges more so, obviously. We'll see what other companies come out with in the future, but bottom line, I absolutely love the 410 handguns. They certainly have their place. Total jack of all trades. So many different things you can do with them. Very good for close range, good for home defense, good for anti-carjacking, tight areas, being out in the dark, out in the wilderness. And let me also put it this way. If you could only get one gun and only one gun, Taurus Judge, honestly, I'd probably pick something like this. I can carry the 45 Long Colt if I'm out and about in a heavily populated area, if I want some range, just like I would any other handgun round pretty much. But if I'm converting it to a home defense handgun, I would go with the 3-inch PDX-1s for this. That's what I use. But again, the federal 410s. You can do multiple things with these guns, and they will work. You just have to make sure you get the correct round. But even with the wrong round, aside from 410 birdshot, they can still absolutely be lethal, especially close up like that. Bottom line, I really like the 410 handguns. They certainly have their place. They're not better than all the other revolvers. What I'm saying is they have advantages the other revolvers don't offer. What are your thoughts on the 410 handguns? Do you still think they're gimmicks? Do you still think they're junk? Do you still think we should just get rid of them by now? Still not convinced? Or do you also like them? Are there any advantages and or disadvantages I missed talking in this video? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, hit that little bell notification if you do not want to miss weekly knife and gun videos. Mannix out.